Hi, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Definitely Gospel Centered. Here is where we have real talk and real conversations in ASL. So today our topic is about parents raising their kids. And I'm so excited for this episode because we have two guests with us today that have two children. One is deaf and one can hear. And both parents are deaf. So please welcome our guests today. Here we have Adan, and then we also have his wife, Emily. And let me get your sign name right. This is correct, yes? Okay, awesome. Great. So excited you guys are here. Welcome. How are y'all?
No complaints
Thank
here.
you. Thank you so much. We're good.
All right. Awesome. If you don't mind going ahead, just sharing a little bit about what your family was like growing up, your hearing loss journey. Adan, if you don't mind,
Yeah, no
we'll
problem.
start
My
the
entire
conversation
family
off
is
with you.
actually hearing. I was probably identified that I was deaf at around 2 to 2.5 years old. They wasn't sure exactly what caused it, but my upbringing was actually within a family that could hear. My family kind of noticed that, and they noticed that I was deaf. So they instantly thought, how could I learn about Jesus? And so they actually brought me to a deaf church. So I actually grew up in a deaf church. I actually graduated from mainstream high school. I was saved by the age of 7. So I really had a unique journey through at least my life with all these different times. Well, I was actually born in a different country. I was
Where did you
I was
grow
actually
up?
born
Where were you
in
born?
Argentina. But I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. Right, essentially where the arches are in St. Louis. That's where I actually grew up. But I graduated high school in California. So a lot of different states that I actually traveled with. I went to Gallaudet University. That's how I actually chased my wife here.
Cool. Well, I was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My family are all hearing. I'm the only
I'd
deaf,
say about 90%.
which is very common in the deaf world. Almost 95%, 96% of deaf children are born to hearing families, and it's very common. My parents decided to go ahead and learn sign language with me, and they communicated. I've never had hearing aids or anything. It was just always my main communication was sign language. I was mainstream all the way. When I got older, I wanted to transfer. I was the only deaf person with an interpreter in mainstream program. I have one sister. We're about 18 months apart. Yeah. Basically 1 year apart. She's hearing, but her heart language is ASL. When they found out I was deaf, when I was about 1 year old, so they started learning sign language. My parents started taking sign language class. Back then, there was no technology. My parents had to go to the library and pull out little flashcards to learn about sign language and deaf. And that's how they learned. They learned through books in the 1980s. So my sister watched and picked up naturally. And she's hearing, but she picked up ASL really fast and quickly.
That
So
is
I had
great.
full access to communication in my home. That's basically my childhood, yeah.
Full communication is so crucial. I'm so glad to hear you had that in your own home growing up. Yeah.
Amen. We want that for all deaf children.
For sure.
We need that.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree 100%. So tell me again, how did you two meet?
You like telling that story.
So do you want to tell it?
Wow,
No, you tell it.
We met. I'm trying to remember. Am I that old now?
2003.
Right, we met in October 2003.
October 2003 we met.
Actually near Gallaudet University. it was essentially at Gallaudet. We actually met at Gallaudet, but it was actually at a coffee shop right after the Campus Crusades for Christ. It was a Thursday night live, essentially. They had it every Thursday. So we went there just kind of as like a hangout session. That's where I actually met her, was through the Campus Crusades.
Yeah, that. I have a story about Campus Crusade for Christ. It's a national organization. It has many
Yeah, they're still running them
campus
today, yeah.
ministries. Still today. Yeah, still running today.
Yeah, Gallaudet's actually aren't there anymore.
It was at Gallaudet, but during my time. I was involved in University of Minnesota undergrad there in Minneapolis. No, I was involved with Campus Crusade through all that. When I graduated, I went to Gallaudet for grad school, and I was like, but I did it anyway. Focusing my master's in psychology. They had Campus Crusade there, and so I got involved. And that's how I met him. And many other wonderful good friends that I'm still friends with today. That's one thing I emphasize to kids, like my daughter Ava, who's deaf. I tell her that it's important to find good, healthy groups of friends to support each other. Especially through the journey of life, it's important. When I look back on my college experience, I had good, healthy friends. And at the University of Minnesota, I had good, healthy friends there too. And then when I transferred to Gallaudet, I had that same, new group of healthy friends. And he was in that.
14 and a half years.
We've been married for how long?
So cool.
March 2008, we're married.
I love that. That's awesome, guys. So
The oldest is
Your
Your oldest
She's
daughter,
12, and our
son or
son,
daughter is the oldest. Your daughter's the oldest.
will
That's
be
right.
6.
12.
Our oldest is deaf, and our youngest is hearing.
Okay, 6.
Yeah, he's a
October.
coda, right? He's child of a deaf adult.
Coda.
Right. So before your kids were born, I guess what was your idea of what?
Well, I think
your family
at first
life
I was
gonna
the first.
look like
I was
when
one
you
of
dreamed ahead?
6. I actually wanted 6. We only ended up getting 2.
Yes.
The Lord gave us 2, but I wanted 6. I envisioned having 6 kids, and that's what I kind of wanted. I saw her family and my family, and I was like, oh, well, we'd probably have a coda at some point, or like 6 codas. That's what we kind of thought. Kind of running around the house, kind of trying to keep our family right, and seeing how communication would happen. We saw a lot of friends
that's what we
that were
think.
in a very much so similar boat as us, and we thought we would probably follow suit in regards to that process. Because about like 90 to 96% ish are actually born to deaf parent or hearing parents. We were actually the reverse. We actually we thought that we would have hearing kids. That didn't actually end up happening. The result, we found out that Ava, our oldest, was deaf. We were actually kind of surprised because that's not something we were expecting. We thought it was really cool. It was a little confusing how that kind of came to be. Just because we would have to have deaf education, and that's a full-time commitment. We know we could homeschool, and that's nice, and public school is nice and everything like that.
bit.
So those options are there, but in reality, it has to be increased in regards to engagement to ensure that our child is able to thrive. To make sure that she's not really neglected, because there are so much things out there for hearing kids. So there are things that we wish that we could have with our parents, that type of engagement with our parents. We felt like we could thrive more. We had to work 4 and 5 times harder. So my daughter was able to have a pretty good experience in that sense. But it was we just had to change our mindset as we're really raising our child who is deaf. So there was a church that we did attend and said, yeah, we do actually have a deaf child. I think she was about 6, maybe 8 weeks at that time, maybe even 4 weeks actually at that time. She was really young. And there was one deaf family that came up to us and was like, "Oh, congratulations. You guys essentially are like Eli's now." I was like, "What?"
Remember deaf you?
I
They
thought it was
talk
kind
about
of
the
confusing.
elite
I was
concept.
like, what do you mean by the elites now? It's like, you guys are now a deaf family. I'm like, oh. It was just one of those kind of shocking moments for me. Now we were classified as a deaf elite, which was kind of a really weird experience. There's another family there that actually had a coda, and we saw that this deaf family came up to say that to us, and not the deaf family with the coda. So that was another interesting experience. Like, why would you tell us that in front of these other individuals? Because what we would experience is really different, and that's not something that we can really pass on. That's something we wanted to pass on to our daughter, is that she would essentially be one of these elite. We just wanted her to grow up with a good community, good church fellowship. We didn't want this elite mentality, because we are a deaf family. We have deaf kids. We are deaf, and there's a mentality that comes with this eliteness of having deaf people in our family. It doesn't matter really about what we can or can't do in regards to being deaf. It matters about our souls as we are on earth. And so that's really changed the shape of our academic experiences, our church-going experiences, really from that moment. And it's been transformative since then.
It's interesting because when Ava was born, we were contacted by an organization, Hands and Voice. That's a national organization, and many states have their own chapter. It's a parent-led organization that supports families with new infant deaf babies and children. At that time, we were living in Minnesota, and they reached me, and I was like, "Who are you?" A parent guide who is deaf, and her 2 kids are deaf as well, and they had cochlear. They do, and I thought they do exist? No, we thought they had limited choices, but no, really, there was unlimited choices. And as I researched more and more, and I FaceTime with other families who are deaf parents with deaf kids, and there's very few of them. So, I connected with them, I contacted, I researched it, I prayed, we decided to go ahead and give Ava a cochlear implant, which is not traditional in a deaf family path. We strayed a little bit. So, when she was almost 2, she got cochlear. But we emphasize the ASL and the deaf culture within our home. We put our daughter in a private oral preschool that focus on sign language and speaking. And this is a very sensitive topic, when we talk about AG Bell and oral movements. But we felt that balance because we were exposing the ASL culture. Today my daughter is fluent in both languages. She can code switch in both, from spoken English to ASL. And even the teacher at that school admit, your daughter was sign ASL and so fluent in that. And it helped her become hearing and speaking faster. And through that, we met many more families with deaf children, with different background and education, different communication background styles. But we felt blessed to be part of that because we're deaf ourselves with different background, and we share our experience with them as the deaf people who are raising deaf kids as well.
Yeah. so interesting because I oftentimes feel like the story is if you go the oral route and focus on spoken English, signing is off limits. So to hear your daughter had both options and how her knowledge of ASL helped her
It's
in
not
English, that's
really
so great that you guys were
harmful
able
to
to
actually learn
provide
two
both.
languages. If you want to learn English and French or English and Spanish, you can learn a lot of languages simultaneously. It doesn't hurt anyone. It doesn't hurt anything. There's no research says that you can't do two languages at the same time. Is there research out there? Yeah. Well, for sign they might have some research on that, but in just regards to spoken language, I don't think that you hear that often.
Right?
So with teaching your family about faith in God and Jesus, what does that look like? Because you have this hearing child and then a deaf child and a coda. Well, I guess the hearing kid is the coda. So you have a coda and a deaf kid. So what do you guys do? What does that look like?
Let's back up a little bit. When Ava was young, I did research with family with children with cochlear, and it showed coda pick up. They pick up language very quickly, and those kids will learn how to code switch to two languages. So what does that mean? More resources at this. And there's so many different resources that we could use to support their journey, both ASL and spoken English and reading. What are some of the stuff that we use?
We have to understand our family dynamic is a little interesting in regards to the coda. There's 3 deaf that are sign fluently, but our son, who is a coda, actually himself prefers to speak. He prefers to use English as his main language, and that's because my daughter will also speak to my son. And so as they are siblings, they speak to each other. So I'm encouraging her to sign to them. So that is a part of our family dynamic. Our son can sign fine and communicate fine. Receptively, he's really skilled. He just himself prefers to speak. Like if I read a story, he prefers me to read it for him instead of sign the story to him, as he's a coda. My daughter, she prefers me to actually sign the story as to read the story. But that's just their preferences. And so that causes us to adapt and figure out what resources we use to actually support both of our kids. Okay, one prefers more auditory based. Like he can't really play any iPad games or anything like that without sound. He's like, oh, the sound has to be required for him. Where our daughter Ava, she doesn't mind playing any games or anything like that without sound. It's the deaf side of her, so you can just see the differences between them. Yeah, right.
With cochlear, without cochlear.
So that really just causes us, like for example, like the Deaf Bible app, Deaf Missions app. Those are perfectly fine to watch those stories, but it's really important because we have to know that there is no sound. So my son's his name is Eli. He watches it and is like, "There's no sound. I want to be able to hear something." He wants it. He has that hunger for auditory noise. And so we have to adjust to make sure that we can meet his needs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to oppress the needs that he has. I wish in some cases more people would think that way. Like, okay, what fits you best? And adjust to their needs. Same with like parents. It's like I wish that we could figure out what we could have needed when we were younger, as to try and maybe speak to our kids, to try and our parents, to try and really match what their needs are as well. And so that's the principle I address with my children, because I want to make sure that I don't oppress my kids' language. I want them to value ASL, but I want to ensure that he is comfortable in language. And the result really is he knows the scripture. He knows Jesus. I feel like he's on the path to actually really want to accept Christ. I mean, I know right now he's 6, but he's able to converse completely in ASL. So he's at that point, he's still just young.
I love
Because he
that.
has the
Yeah.
I
ability
do.
to
I think
communicate.
that's so great. Right.
We empathize. At nighttime, my daughter loved to talk before she go to bed. She talked, and we pray together and we talk. And we use devotion. Me, Emily, I love to read. I go to the library 2 times a week, maybe. Ava loves reading as well. So we look for a lot of Christian resources as parents to help our kids learn. We use technology, but sometimes technology is not allowed at bedtime, so we have a cutoff for them. So books are the way to go, and we talk in person. There's a time for everything. So let me tell you some stuff that we use. You see how good
We got
we are.
about 2 months
book.
left.
Yes.
And
Yes, I
we've read
love
pretty much
it.
everyone this year.
Wow.
Eli us reading this book over and over.
Yeah.
So, do you mind showing me near the camera so we can see a little bit better? Okay. Yeah.
The preschool, so any kid really, any person can do that. And I have so many more books, but those are just a few of the examples that we use. And my daughter loves reading them. For me, I tell them to read, but I read and then I tell them, a parent book. I love it so much. It's a good perspective and allows me to check my heart and see how I'm approaching my kid. Again, my background is psychology development and the mind development, emotional development. And I emphasize reading books. And this book talked about what happened, before in our life and how that caused us to grow. I watch teachers, telling stories to deaf kids and then pull out of them questions. So it helps you, develop questions and how to pull out from kids, from emotional, and broadness. For deaf kids, their hearing is maybe limited to what they see becomes important. Kid book, there's so many. The library is really the best place to go. That's some of what we use to support our kids' journey and their growing as individuals, as a follower of Christ, and really setting by example. And we live by example. We have a
we
lot
guide
of
them to be able to
conversation.
identify, just to really just show them, and things come up in conversation. There's some nights, like one night we talked about like Jesus and the cross, that caused my son to really start to ask questions about death, what's beyond earth, what all that things look like, and he's like, I don't want to die. It's like those are the kinds of conversations that it kind of spurred. So it was really just an interesting journey that we had, because we've had some deaths in the family. His great grandfather had passed away, and so he was just like, what's up with that death? They're gone. What does that mean? So we had to have some conversations about that. So it's really important to have that, and those devotionals really help kind of open those type of dialogues, enabling him to actually ask questions.
Yeah, I remember one time while driving my oldest son, who's going to be 5 soon actually, he just randomly goes, Mama, if Dad dies, what happens? And, of course, what a question to ask. Like, Because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that would be absolutely horrible. That would be so sad. It's a terrible question. Why would you ask that? But in reality, it's a really good conversation we were able to have about the faithfulness of God. And so I was like, well, son, Daddy's saved. And so if he dies, and we know that's going to happen sometime, but, if he dies, we'll see him again in heaven. And so we were able to talk about salvation from this other perspective. So, yeah, it's so good.
That's exactly what we talk about, and we emphasize over and over. But we want to remind you of patience. Let the kid process. At the age of 6, they start reasoning and understanding, and those type of questions will come up. And again, it's based on life experience. A family member die, that's more of a trigger. A development stage. It's appropriate and natural.
Yes, no, I agree completely. I know. So then, if there are people who are trying to figure things out or maybe feel confused or conflicted with their journey of how to teach their kids, certain things about navigating deafness, or this, teaching a hearing child instead of a deaf child, and if they have different kind of frustrations in this process, what would you recommend for them to do? Like, just, I don't know, maybe this is just a general life advice, but do you know what I'm trying to say?
One thing, for example, with Hand and Voice organization, we bring parents together, that have the same experience, and then we read other parents, and then we support them. For deaf community, they want to come together to support each other. That's very common experience. And kids need that as well. They need to feel that connection, that bond. For that example, you know what I mean? You really need like a good support system with people who really completely understand what you're going through. And if you try to do it alone, don't do it alone. And that's really sad because many deaf kids are isolated in their homes and their life, and that doesn't really help. And those kids will struggle because they're gonna be like, where are the other deaf people or deaf kids like me, because they don't have that support or that community. And yes, hearing loss is a spectrum. We're still deaf at the end of the day. It's obvious, So where's that support for both parent and kid? You need that support system, period. We need unity. And for those type of parents and kids who want to learn more about God. So we need that type of unity. It's important.
I agree. Gaby?
Yeah, that actually reminds me. It reminds me about that verse in the scriptures that talks about teaching our kids the way they should go. You know that verse?
Yes, I know that.
Oh
Could we talk about that?
Is that? Do you know the reference? Yeah. Oh my goodness! Give me a second. Let me
But I don't know where in the Bible.
We'll cut out this part.
Right, where is it? I have to find it. Give me just a moment. Okay. Found it. Yeah. It's in Proverbs in chapter 22. Yep, 22 verse 6. Yep, that's the one. So it says to train up your child in the way he should go, and when he is old,
if they leave,
he will
they'll
not
come back.
depart from it. Yeah.
Just keep going.
So, I think your point too is about the support system, how it's a collaborative effort, how we need to support each other in learning
Exactly.
about the Lord and in communicating. And communication is so crucial, right?
I have something I want to add.
Yeah.
Going back, I remember when Ava was young, and she was in the mainstream in Minnesota, and she was the only deaf school in that school and district. They had strong deaf teachers there in Minnesota, but the students all went to
Specifically,
different schools
115
all over the
deaf and
district.
hard of hearing kids within essentially a 10 to 15 mile radius. There were different schools. There was about, I think, 115. Not a single one knew each other.
They didn't get together often? No, that was in Minnesota. No, they're first.
At the point.
Stay where you are, that. But my point is, when we moved to Texas, in Texas they have a regional day school program. For example, in Dallas-Fort Worth, it's so huge. So in many of the districts, they have regional day programs. But several of the districts group together to allow the opportunity for the students to be together. And we didn't know that. We didn't know anything about Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we had to do a lot of research, talk with the deaf community, and then we found the perfect school district. They had deaf students there. Even though Ava was mainstream with an interpreter, a certified interpreter, let me emphasize that. And really fit Ava's language. But we put her there because deaf students are there in the building. She has community there, and she's not alone. And for her, she said she feels better there because she has friends and a community there, there's deaf there, interpreter. And there's like 3 to 4 interpreters available in one building, which is nice. So I put Eli in that school as well. But now Ava's in a middle school and Eli's in kindergarten. But it was really cool. I contacted the teacher and I needed an interpreter. The kindergarten plus Zoom. Kindergarten kids on Zoom. So the first 6 weeks, all the kids stayed virtual. After that, they put them back into school. So the parents had options. How do you know that when the teacher's speaking, you have to watch? You have to click mute. Eli, Pritchard, kindergarten kids. So I have to sit there and watch them and be with them. And help him stay focused. But how do I follow if there's no interpreter for me to support him? So I told the school, we need access to that school. Because they have an interpreter there, and they have double coded there, and a community there, and we must share that type of environment and that type of community. It's ASL friendly awareness. It's more better and smooth for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You want to say anything? I kind of exaggerated a little
Absolutely
bit.
fine. I agree 100% with everything you had to share, Emily. But thank you so much, both of you, for the information you shared and just your life experience. It has so much value to everyone watching. And I know we have a lot of deaf, hard of hearing, and hearing people that's watching this episode. So it's just so exciting to know that they're going to learn something from this navigation you guys are going through in raising not just a deaf kid, but also hearing kids, these CODA. So I just want to take a minute and just applaud you guys for what you're doing and how you're providing access in teaching both of your kids in the ways they need to learn about Jesus. So thank you for the example
Thank you.
you're setting for them from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Keep supporting.
Absolutely.
No, that's important.
Absolutely. And to any of our viewers out there, if you need to be a part of a community, if you're looking for deaf people, if you're trying to find a deaf community, please reach out. We'd love to connect you with someone that we know, or if you just feel isolated, that you don't have the support system we've been talking about, know there are people out there that want to connect with you and they want to be that for you. So please reach out. Thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you feel encouraged for this episode and you're ready to serve your kids if you have any, or you're ready to love on other people's kids, whether they have deaf kids, hearing kids. That's not the point. Adan, like you said, deaf or hearing, or hard of hearing, we are all made in God's image. Image. Am I saying that right? Okay, image. Yeah, I knew I wasn't saying that quite right. Image.
Yeah.
Got it. His image. But yeah, hopefully see you guys in 2 weeks on our next episode. And Adan and Emily, thank you guys again for joining us today. Love you guys so much. Thanks.
Bye.